We're ready to go.
Ready to go. Okay. All right. Consider us started. Welcome to the November 4th meeting of the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee, everybody. We might have a little change in the agenda, just switching county administration and the NISAC report. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay. Katrina, do we have any public comment?
Nope.
Okay, we'll get rid of those two items then. All right, Jason, why don't you go ahead, take it away on your report.
Sure. Thank you. The only thing I wanted to report on, and I can send this to the group, I was going to send it to the legislature later today, is I've had a chance to review the governor's mid-year, or the budget director's mid-year review. I don't know if you've seen it all. And it just gives kind of mid-year projections for the year and what their assumptions might be for next year. Throughout it, it doesn't give specificity, but throughout it, it basically identifies that, you know, helping fill their gap, their financial gap, will come from $8 billion of intermunicipal aid or some form of intermunicipal aid, which would mean aid to municipalities. That's what they label it as. It's not identified where that's going to come from, but it's identified that that's where they're going to get part of this gap in revenue that they're having, is they're going to cut $8 billion of intermunicipal aid. So that's concerning, but is somewhat consistent with what we've heard the governor talk about with the 20% withholding in aid through this year. It's the first time it's been put in writing, I think, and we've actually seen it out there. The other thing is that they estimate their revenue projections to be slower on the recovery into 2024 from the state's perspective. So that's the first time I've seen the revenue recovery back to pre-COVID levels into 2024. It's a rather lengthy document, but I was going to send it to everyone just pretty much with that recap. Ryan was probably going to talk a little bit about it in terms of his update. I know on Monday, he and Steve from NISAC were approaching Budget Director Mojica about just issues around sharing the additional $5 billion in CARES aid that they have with the municipalities. I think New York is one of 2 states that haven't done that. And I provided him with some information about year-to-date costs, COVID costs. I know he got some also from a larger county and from a smaller county as part of their kind of arsenal to bring with them to talk with the budget director. I don't know how that went, but I know they were having those conversations earlier this week. So that's all. I'll send out the mid-year review to the legislature later today, but that's all I want to do in terms of give a brief update on things.
Thank you, Jason. Comments or questions? Deborah.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So this $5 million, no, I didn't mean it sarcastically. Yeah. We can't blame you for this one.
You can do that.
That $5 million in CARES aid that you were talking about, is that the money that was referred to in the email that Sarah Collada sent us?
5 billion, not 5 million.
Right.
I think yes. So basically, most states have shared CARES funding, this with municipalities smaller than 500,000 people. So larger counties like Monroe and Erie did get some allotment. I think Onondaga might have as well. But this is CARES funding that has not been shared, but the state has and has the discretionary ability to. So I think that email that you're referring to, yes, that would be that email. And there's Ryan. I'm sure he can talk a little bit more about it. But yes, that's the funding that we're talking about. Ryan, I just gave him a quick update on the mid-year review, budget director's mid-year review, which I read, and the unspecific reference to $8 billion of aid to localities that were being used to fill part of the hole, and that revenue projections we're looking to recover as far out as 2024. But
that's right.
Welcome, Ryan. Glad to have you here. Thank you.
I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Go ahead.
Great to see everyone. Thanks, Martha. Thanks, Jason. And good morning, everybody. Martha, thank you for inviting me again to join the committee. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to give everyone a little bit of an update from NISAC. what we're seeing here at the federal level and the state level. To just piggyback off of what Jason was speaking about a moment ago, the state has about, they received $5.1 billion through the U.S. CARES Act in their coronavirus relief fund allocation. So you'll remember that counties that had a population greater than 500,000 received a direct allocation. So Onondaga, Monroe, Erie, Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk, and New York City. Or I'm sorry, not Onondaga. Everyone but Onondaga that I just said. Onondaga was 30,000 short, and they were not happy about that. But the state has about $2.5 billion based on our calculation through what we've received from the U.S. Treasury left to be spent down. Now, we had a meeting with the budget director on Monday, and I can give everyone some updates from that meeting. We talked to Mr. Mujica about this issue, and he said to us that there is still some money unspent. It's less than 2.1 billion. However, the state has a list of other expenses that they're going to be submitting claims for. So he said by December 30th, they will actually have more expense than what they can get reimbursed for. So he said I could go out and give the local governments money, but he said if I do that, I'm going to have to take it out of your pocket somewhere else to pay for the expense from COVID-19. So we said, okay, we get it, Robert, we understand. So that was one negative of the meeting, but there was a lot of positives in the meeting that I do want to highlight. So the governor's office this year is coming to NYSAC in a much different relationship than they have historically. In the past, it's been very contentious. They've used our analysis to combat some of our narrative, particularly around the distressed hospital fund, sales tax diversion, and the AIM-related payments diversion. There was a lot of contention historically on those issues. Robert really came to us with an olive branch, and I'm not just saying that to get everyone's hopes up. Maybe it's getting my hopes up, but they've come to us in a much different situation than they have historically. And what Robert told us was, NYSAC, I want to actually work with you guys to reduce your costs, because he recognizes the dramatic loss in sales tax revenue. Tompkins County especially is being hurt. And I do think in out years, because of what the governor is planning in his long-term financial plan right now, granted the legislature has to go along with that, but with what we're seeing in sales tax receipts going down, with the state aid reduction that he's budgeting for, which Jason was just talking about, $8 million in all of these out years, the counties should be expecting significant state aid reductions this year and future years if federal stimulus aid doesn't arrive. And I'll speak to that in a moment. Based on
you said 8 million, you mean 8 billion?
8 billion, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry about that. $8 billion. It's a massive amount of money that he's going to have to cut from the state aid to localities budget. And keep in mind, right, there's a couple components that come out of that budget line. It's aid to local governments for highways, our reimbursement programs for DSS, social services, human services programs, all of your Office of Community Service programs, so your mental health departments, all of that comes out of the aid to localities budget for the most part. But also education aid comes out of that budget line, and assistance to hospitals. Now we know that the governor is not going to reduce aid to hospitals right now. We've pretty much, I mean, you can read the tea leaves on that one. It's pretty clear. On school aid, I don't think the legislature is going to allow him to make those kind of cuts. And what Robert told us during the meeting was, at some point down the road, within the next 4 months, DOB is going to have to release a plan to the legislature which outlines what these cuts are going to be and if they're going to be made permanent. He admitted that to us. He said, look, I'm going to have to, in the absence of federal aid, I'm going to have to come to the legislature and present a plan that outlines this is what we have to do to balance our budget. And within that, there's going to be some cuts to counties. We don't know what the exact percentage is going to be. It probably won't be 20% based on what Dave Lucas is thinking, but it is going to be a significant amount of money. And then in the out years, right, because his budget gap grows, it's $63 billion now, and it dramatically grows in out years. So we know for a fact that state aid is going to be an issue for future years. So just to keep that in everyone's mind, I know, a lot of counties are, I think Tompkins County already passed your budget for next year, but there's a lot of other counties that are still in their negotiation process, and folks should really keep an eye on state aid because it's going to be an issue in future years. It really will be.
Ron, we passed the tentative budget. We haven't done the final yet.
Okay. So Martha, can I stop there, take some questions on the state side before I go to the federal stuff?
Sounds good. Anna? Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan, so much. How are you?
Or hi, Anna.
You mentioned an olive branch, and I'm still trying to
Yeah.
piece out where the olive branch is.
Okay, I guess I didn't touch too much on the olive branch. So what Robert told us, what Robert told us was, so NISAC issued a DOB recommendations report. We collected a lot of ideas. Tompkins County sent us like 15 or 20 ideas. Counties from across the state did the same thing. We compiled this report. It's like 9 pages long. We're adding another couple pages to it today or tomorrow we've received other recommendations from New York City. And we gave that to Robert and said, look, this is a collection of ideas supplied to us by the counties. This is a brainstorming document. It's to start a discussion on how can we improve service delivery? How can we deliver our services more efficiently to residents? And how do we save money while doing it at the same time? So there was a series of programmatic reforms that require statutory changes. There were administrative actions that could be taken, particularly on the social services side. And then there were cost concerns that counties had. And there was ways that we created opportunities to mitigate the issue for the state. So for example, in the Children with Special Needs program, something that NISAC, NISHO, and the early intervention community across the state, the activists, have been working on is a covered lives assessment. We proposed that to DOB as a way to mitigate and reduce the county cost and the state cost by tacking on a very, very small covered lives assessment fee onto commercial insurance plans. Those are just a couple examples of what we presented to him. He really appreciated that, Anna. And what he told us was, this is the first time that NISAC is, in the last 5 years, has proposed a very lengthy document of this kind to DOB at this stage of the game. Usually we do this in February when discussions are really getting heated. This time we proposed it to him in November 2nd. So he really liked that. There's a lot of opportunities that he wants to look into, and he's actually tasked his deputy and first deputy, Sandra and Charlie Williams, to go line by line, meet with their unit chiefs, and come up with a plan of whether or not we can include this in the executive budget.
And can you share that document with us once in its final form? That would be really lovely.
Absolutely. 100%.
And the other, that would be great. And the other last piece of that is, for the last couple of years, we have been doing shared services as a requirement from the state to increase our efficiency measures. Has there been any report released on the upshot of how effective that was?
Yeah.
And did they talk about that at all, of expectations or requirements and increased requirements?
Sure. So there has not been a report released on that, Anna. And actually, a lot of counties have not even received their match reimbursement from the state. I don't know if Tompkins is in that
We
situation.
just got an email yesterday for the 2018 items.
Oh, good grief.
We have to sign.
The checks in the mail?
No, not even. We have to get another round of signatures from partner municipalities to submit. So this is things that were done in 2018.
Yeah, so this process, we brought this issue up on shared services. We said, we've put forth a good faith effort across the state on this, and we're not receiving the matching funds for the program as it was designed to happen. And DOB acknowledged it. They kind of shrugged it off. They said, well, this is part of the issue, the financial cash flow management concern that we have. We'll take a look at it. That was kind of where they left it with us. So we're gonna be meeting with DOB again in 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll raise this issue again with them and say, look, we need some direction on this.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to hear the last thing you said, Ryan.
We'll just raise it with DOB and make sure that, this continues to be an issue, and we need some clarity and some decisions out of the state on what's happening here.
Right. Deborah?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And you and Dave Lucas do such a good job. We really appreciate what
Thank you, Deborah.
I was curious to know if shared jails, regional jails, were on that list that you sent up, because that's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah, shared jails and jail staffing ratio policy reform were on the agenda, Deborah, that we sent up. There's a lot of counties across the state that either have to build a brand new jail facility or they were just forced to build a brand new jail facility. For example, Sullivan County just built a 350 bed facility. They have like 40 inmates right now.
It's ridiculous.
And they have to staff it. So this gets to the jail staffing issue. They have to staff it based on the number of beds, not on the number of inmates. And it's an SCOC regulation. It's section 45 of the correctional law. I've been working with Assemblywoman Dee Dee Barrett. She's in Dutchess County. She's proposed the legislation that would allow the chief executive officer, the chief administrative officer to work with the county sheriff to develop a revised jail staffing ratio plan and get SCOC out of the picture. Every time that we've met with SCOC, they said, well, yeah, we can go and redo a jail survey to determine what the jail staffing needs are, but we just don't have the manpower. And we said, okay, the Sheriff's Association wants to work with the counties on this. The counties want to work on this issue. It's a no-brainer. There's no reason why the counties can't have the control to look locally at what they need and determine what's the best outcome. Some counties are going to choose, rather than building a new jail facility, let's partner with a neighboring county and we can transport our inmates there. There's counties that want to do that right now. So yes, both of those ideas are on the agenda. Robert, actually, when he was speaking to us, he told us that he's going to be meeting with SCOC himself, which has not happened to date on these issues, and get a decision from them. Either are they going to do this and force them to come up with a time frame to reform their regulations, or does the executive need to throw something in to their budget? And he said that he would pursue this, and we're gonna, in 2 weeks when we re-meet with him, we'll have a better sense of what the outcome of that meeting was. So there was some positive traction on those two issues, Deborah, but I mean, you know how it is. It takes, we'll have to see what happens in the executive budget and where the cards fall with the legislature next year.
Thank you.
Henry.
Yes. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Henry.
I missed Jason's introduction, but in terms of the state reimbursement of state aid, did you say that it would be more or less than 20% for next year?
Yeah, for next year, it's probably, and this is all hypothetical, Henry, based on what the feds do, if anything.
Right.
It will probably be some reduction less than 20%.
Okay.
As of today. That could change in a week from now. It could be more than 20%, or it could be less than 20%. But right now, I think it's going to fall somewhere between 15% and 20% reduction in state aid. But the key to remember is and Jason touched on this, in his out year budget, because when he presents a mid-year financial plan budget, he includes estimations for future years. Even though in New York, we only budget on a 1-year cycle, he does it for 5 years. And when you look out in the out years, 2022, 23, 24, 25, he includes that $8 million state aid reduction in every single year, which means the legislature, when he proposes his budget, the legislature is going to have to buy back $8 billion worth of cuts. I mean, it's hard for me to even imagine that magnitude of cuts. Truly,
Right.
it's a ton of money to come up with. Forget anything new. Forget any new initiatives. That's just buying back to get back to square one. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Donna?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for attending today. I have 2 questions. Can you tell us if there are any updates on higher ed and then public education as far as, I know that last we heard that they were withholding 20%, and just wanted to see if you had heard any more on that.
Yeah, great. Hi, Shauna. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
So yeah, Robert, when we talked to him and we brought up this issue of, can we get some transparency on the 20% state aid cuts? We know that you're withholding across our program lines. I haven't, and neither has Dave. We have yet to see an official breakdown of where these state aid withholds are and what the plan is for future action. We don't have that yet. We've asked the legislature for that. And I know you guys had Todd Sherman from the Senate on a couple of weeks ago. We've talked to Todd. We've talked to Blake Washington, his counterpart in the Assembly. They don't have that information either. So we've asked DOB, can you share with us something so at least it'll help us plan our activities so we know what to expect going forward. And when we asked Robert that question, he mentioned, well, you guys aren't the only ones. We're withholding aid on school aid right now, and we're withholding aid on community colleges too. So it sounds like it's across the board, but Shauna, what's frustrating for me is all I want is a spreadsheet showing where the state aid withholds are, what the budgeted amount was, what they've released, what they're going to release, and how much is being withheld. Those are the 4 columns.
Yeah. Some transparency
columns
would be nice right now.
Yeah, but we haven't got that yet. We've asked the DOB for it. Robert acknowledged it, but I don't know if we'll receive it.
And then my second question was, do you foresee the legalization of marijuana occurring this year? I know that there were 4 or 5 states that voted on it last night and it passed.
Yep, it did. It passed in 4 or 5 states. I think the governor is coming around to, so the governor had a constitutional argument in past years. Senator Kruger was reelected and Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes was reelected. They're going to hold on to their majorities. The Assembly will hold on to their majority. The Senate will hold on to their majority. I don't think right now the Senate's going to get to a supermajority. I just don't see the math happening. But regardless, I do think the governor is looking for every penny of revenue he can come out with. And I do think that recreational marijuana legalization will be on the forefront of the state legislature's agenda going into 2021. I think the governor is going to propose something in his executive budget proposal. I'm guessing it's going to be similar to what he's done in the past, and that'll serve as his bargaining chip going forward.
All right, before I go to a lot of hands up, Jason said had to leave in a few minutes for another meeting. Do you have any other comments or questions, Jason?
The only thing I would add to the legislators is internally we'll be going through some budget estimates for year end, and I'm going to ask department heads to tag what revenues are being withheld. So Ryan, when we assemble that, which probably won't be till early December, I could share it with you and you'll see what we're missing from our end, what we can identify. Some of it is 20%, some of it's less or more, but we'll try to we'll try to, whatever I can share with you, I will.
That'll be helpful, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by.
Do you want me to touch real quick on the federal stuff, Martha, where we think things stand?
Yeah, and
I have one more question on the state stuff, though.
Deborah, we have a lot of questions on the state stuff. A lot of hands up. So did Jason leave? Oh, well, yeah, go ahead quickly on the federal. And
I'm right here.
Okay. Go ahead on the federal quickly and we'll come back to the state. We have certainly till 12:30 with Ryan. So go ahead.
Yep. Okay, so on federal, it appears that Senator McConnell and the Senate Republicans right now are probably going to hold power in the U.S. Senate, and the House of Representatives will remain in Democrat control. Then with the presidency, I think it's too early to call. We'll have to see when all the ballots get counted on where that falls. But what that really means for us is more or less it's a status quo with the federal stimulus. We're going to have to continue to fight, but at the end of the day, the cards are going to fall with the U.S. Senate, and whether or not Senator McConnell wants to put a bill on the floor that includes state and local aid. I don't know. I think it's too early to tell right now. I will say within the New York delegation, there were a couple surprising upsets, and it's a little unfortunate for us. It appears that Congressman Brindisi, who represents the neighboring district to you, is not going to win his election.
No, there are like 27 or 28,000 absentee ballots.
Okay. Well, he might still eke out a win. I hope he does, because he's been a strong ally of counties.
Yeah, I think what I saw, just very briefly, I think the only one that I saw it was called was Tom Reed's seat. But it looks like virtually everything else, a lot of, like Rachel May is behind, but there are thousands of absentee ballots.
Yeah, there's the vast majority of, that's a good point, Martha. The vast majority of the races are uncalled. It's too close right now. Same within the congressional delegation. We'll have to see where cards fall within the New York delegation. But as far as federal stimulus goes, I don't see anything happening before January right now, especially if the presidential election fight drags out over time. It's going to be very hard for a lame duck Congress to come back and do something on that front. I just don't see it happening right now. Okay, back to state questions.
Yes, I need. All right, I won't say. I've got Sean, is your hand up again or still?
No, sorry, I'll put it down.
Okay, I've got Mike Lane, Mike Sigler, and then I'm going to take a turn before going to Anna and Deborah. So.
Oh, Deborah needed to finish.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, it's all state aid. I can come back to it, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Deborah already had a turn.
All right. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Mike.
You touched on the TC3, or not TC3, that's our community college, but on community college aid, and we're really up against it with not knowing what the state's going to do for that. So we're kind of interested in any update and any pressure we can put on them to make a decision there. Another issue is we're wondering about the airport program for next year, and what if anything you're hearing on that. And I'll just throw this one out. Maybe it's a little advanced, but I don't think it's too early to start thinking about what the redistricting process is going to be at the legislative level after census.
Yeah. Let me touch on the redistricting. Well, the redistricting process. I think it is. I don't have a sense of it right now, Mike. I think it's a little too early to tell how that's going to shake itself out with the 2020-2021 legislature, and if there's going to be some dynamic that plays out in that on that front. On the community college component, I had a couple conversations with Jason maybe a month or so ago on TC3, some of the cash flow issues that they were experiencing. And we brought this up to Robert's attention then, I will circle back with Jason. I want to get the latest on that issue, and then maybe what I can do is when we re-engage with Robert, we can bring it up as a local issue for him to target
That would be
again.
great.
Yeah. And then you had one other question. I can't remember.
Airports.
Oh, airports, right. So I think I'm going to take airports, chips, and extreme weather as a block of 3 because they're all budgeted within, for the most part, most of the money is budgeted out of the capital budget from the state. And right now, even though New York State recently got a bond down, their bond rating was downgraded from AA1 to AA2. The rates are still very low for New York State. So I think they're still going to go ahead and fund that. Their debt service payments are actually supposed to drop in future years. So I'm not too worried on the capital side of things, Mike. I do think there'll be a budget allocation for those programs next year because it's very cheap to go out and bond right now. So that's not the primary area of where the cuts are going to take place. Now, that being said, we've asked for a DOT 5-year capital plan, which includes a whole series of county recommendations and an increase in allocation to CHIPS because that's been held flat for 5 or 7 years now.
Yep.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a DOT 5-year capital plan. And I don't think we're going to see any increase in CHIPS or extreme weather funding.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mike Sigler.
Hi, Ryan. So part of the reason of this committee really is messaging. So I wanted to ask you this question. We keep talking about this funding as withholding, like the state is withholding this money. I guess my question for you is if that's really the right messaging, because it doesn't seem to me that the money is going to be there. It's not like the state has the money in a pot somewhere and they're saying, no, we're not going to give that to you yet. I'm of the mind that they're literally not going to send it at all. And that we need to, as a county, kind of plan for that and say, yeah, I mean, even if, we have something later on this agenda here that's calling for a hike in taxes, even if that were to happen, that wouldn't be this year's budget or maybe even next year's budget to see any kind of extra cash, if there would be any cash at all. But it seems to me that this next 2 years, that money's just gone. And I guess we can push against the state and say that it's withholding, but it really isn't. I mean, is that about right?
So that's a really good point you bring up, Mike. So the public messaging from the state is withholding because he hasn't announced a permanent plan to the legislature. So the legislature hasn't actually seen a plan. And if you recall in the state budget, there was language inserted that said when the budget director has to make a certain level of cuts, he has to present a plan to the legislature. He hasn't done that yet. He's only been withholding the aid, saying that the counties and everyone else will get reimbursed their full budgeted allocation at this point. Now, we know, to your point, Mike, that, I mean, the prospects of us getting a federal stimulus program by the end of the state fiscal year, which is March 31st, is really up in the air. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get any local relief or state relief for that matter. So those cuts will probably become permanent to some level. And that's what I was mentioning to Henry. Is it 15%? Is it 20%? Is it some number lower? It's going to be something. I don't know what exactly that percent reduction is going to look like. But at the time when the state says, okay, uncle, and they present a plan to the legislature, however the legislature reacts, at the end of the day, then those cuts will be made permanent, quote unquote. And I do think as part of his executive budget, based on what he's put in his mid-year financial update, he is going to budget some kind of cut in aid to localities again next year. So to your point, Mike, it's not just 1 year, it's going to be a multi-year cut right now.
All right. No, great. Thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to take a turn. And I think this withholding, it is tied to the federal bill. He keeps, we haven't actually got an actual no yet on federal aid. Couple other questions. What about Code Blue? Have you talked about that with him? That's a big dollar figure for us.
Right. So on Code Blue, he created a line item in his budget, and it was adopted. It was included in the adopted budget for $13 million in new Code Blue appropriations. Martha, let me put that onto our list to look into that right now. I don't know what the status is of that $13 million appropriation. But let me find out.
13 million for the whole state?
That's correct.
13
Outside
million
of
more?
New York City. Outside of New York City.
Is that on top of what's been allocated before?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Because with COVID, we're having to separate people. We're actually spending more by putting people in hotel rooms instead of in church basements, which we had succeeded in doing last winter. We were able to reduce our costs, but we can't put people in congregate spaces now.
Because of the isolation factor.
Right.
Okay.
So that's killing us. The other question.
But they are putting people in like gyms 6 feet
What?
apart. They are putting people in gyms like 6 feet apart.
Okay, were you in that meeting yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, they're putting people in gyms 6 feet apart. Okay, all right, well, Code Blue is still a question. What about all of the conversation about the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act and all the things supposed to happen there? Any new spending on climate, would that come out of NYSERDA money and therefore Reggie money? Is that a different revenue stream?
It would probably come out of the EPF, the Environmental Protection Fund, Martha. And the question really, so this has been a weird area, and I think we should loop Alex in on this discussion, but here's what's happened. So the legislature has appropriated, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but a certain number within the EPF fund, the Environmental Protection Fund. But the money isn't spent every year. There's a huge reappropriation that happens every year, and it's more than 50% of that budget allocation. So I guess what I'm struggling with is, if the money's there, why isn't it being spent? And then two, to your point, for future climate action dollars, what does that look like? And if it's really uncertain right now with as far as spending the appropriated amount of money, what's going to happen with the EPF next year? So there's two issues with that. Why isn't the current EPF allocation being completely spent, and what's going to happen next year? And I think we could try and get some answers on that. I don't have the answers. I don't know.
Is that general fund money, or is it a different? That's why I thought Reggie was the source of that kind of funding.
Okay. The EPF is separate from the general fund.
Right.
I'll have to look and see. I just don't know on the Reggie money, where that's coming out of.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Anna, and then Deborah.
This is phenomenal. I wish we could do this for like 7 hours and keep picking your brain, Ryan. So thank you so much. And thank you, Martha, for putting these together. So a couple questions. It always seems like devil's in the details on all of these, and that's why I'm so nervous about glossing surface of things. So when we talked about legalization of marijuana, for example, last year when that was put forward, it seemed to me that there was sort of a fatal flaw in the way that it was designed, which would have pulled a lot of the revenues for the state, very little going to counties. Mm-hmm. But because it is still federally illegal, any of the dispensaries would have significant amounts of cannabis and cash. which makes them, of course, a target, which means that it's an unfunded mandate of law enforcement, for the issues that, of course, that could bring up. So that was something that has not been addressed. There's been no funding put into that. Is there any discussion with that? Is there any push at NISAC? And I certainly would suggest that that be brought forward as a resolution to require that that be, or urge that that be a component of it, or otherwise we have to stop new unfunded mandates, while we're fighting the ones that already exist, is, I guess, my concern. So I wanted to hear your thoughts and any conversation about that.
Sure. So on cannabis legalization, the association's position has been on two issues. One is on the point of sale. We want the authority to be able to levy our local sales tax on the point of sale. On the second issue, for the communities, particularly in the southern tier, who are going to likely be cultivation communities, but not necessarily where the sale is going to occur because of population and et cetera. We want a portion of the 20% of the cultivation tax to be given to the county so we can use that to address whatever unforeseen law enforcement issues may arise. The federal legislation that would modify the way that cannabis is classified is called the States Act, STATES, the States Act. That has not moved out of committee in the past. However, given last night's results, as more states go this route, I do think there'll be pressure put on the federal government to approve this legislation. And I'll add this too. Senator McConnell in Kentucky actually likes this legislation because he thinks that a lot of the tobacco farmers that have been really hurt in the past are going to convert to becoming cannabis farmers. So he kind of wants this to pass to help out the industry within the state of Kentucky.
Wow. Okay, so then thank you. And then my other comment, but back to the community colleges, one of the things that we've heard rumored is that, or more than rumored, is the possibility of consolidation of community colleges as an efficiency measure. Everything that you're talking about today is making me more concerned about that. And I just want to put in, I guess, a plug before a question. The whole point of community colleges is that people who have to work and go to school part-time and have families can go to a community college that's in their backyard. And the idea of having a community college that they have to drive to 2 hours away literally makes that not possible. And we have seen an uptick locally of part-time students in our community colleges. So in TC3. So I just wanted to make sure you are aware of that it will hurt community colleges more, I think, than is being currently estimated. And I wanted to just check to see, I mean, that would be a piece of resolution I would love to see come out of NISAC this coming year as well, against that move for those reasons. But I wanted to see if you'd heard anything.
Yeah, so that would be a great resolution for the NISAC Intergovernmental Committee. So, and maybe that's something, if a county can pass that resolution, then NISAC can take it and incorporate it with a ledge conference. And we haven't set a timeline yet of when we're collecting resolution ideas. So there's still time to, like, for example, if Tompkins County wanted to pass that resolution, you could, right, and then we could consider it at
hint, Martha, you and I have another joint task.
We got it.
All right, Martha,
on the consolidation, I haven't heard that yet, and however, what NISAC has been advocating for with community colleges, there's a couple issues right now. One, the chargeback formula needs to completely be overhauled. There's a wide discrepancy in chargeback rates. If you are sending a child to FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, you are paying quadruple or more compared to if you send, if a student ends up going to Herkimer County Community College from Tompkins County. So on the FIT note, what we've asked SUNY, and we have a meeting with Bob Magna, who is Jim Malatris's #2, He used to be the budget director in the state of New York. We had a meeting with Bob Magna, and we're going to have another one. And we brought up the issue of, so FIT offers students 4-year degrees and 6-year degrees. Most community colleges, actually, I'm not sure if I'm aware of any, offer a master's degree for an individual. So what we've asked SUNY to do is reorganize FIT, and rather it be a community college, create it as a regular SUNY campus. And that would alleviate a ton of financial pressure on the counties, which then you can make the argument that you were just raising, Anna, which is what a community college was set up to begin with, which is really a education institution close to home for an individual who's working or unable to afford to live on campus. They're still able to go and get that higher education.
It's like the foundation of creating equity would be taken away.
Right. So maybe one way to combat that is to reclassify FIT, because frankly,
It's not a community college.
yeah, it's a regular SUNY campus. There's no reason that it should be. In New York City, by the way, New York City is fully supportive of this because they have to pay the sponsored contribution rate to FIT. So they want it to be classified, and maybe you classify it as a CUNY, part of the CUNY system, because it's in New York City. But it needs to be reclassified. There's no reason for it to be a community college. So we're trying to push for that distinction. Now here's the other thing. One argument that people say on that is, well, we should still provide tuition assistance for individuals going to that community college. The counter argument with FIT is tuition is like $35,000 a year. I think for one kid to go, the county's spending $18,000, which means the state's spending $18,000 and the student's spending $18,000. When I went to SUNY Brockport in Rochester, my tuition bill was nowhere near $18,000 a year. So I don't buy the argument that FIT is a community college. And NISAC, I mean, this has been a long-standing policy at NISAC, but we're trying to make a new concerted effort this year.
All right, we got Deborah, and then we're going to wrap up because Diane's waiting for us, and we want to hear what she has to say too.
Yeah, just parenthetically, my daughter got a degree in fashion design and she looked at FIT. That is not a community college by any stretch of the imagination. But in any event, the question I had, Ryan, was, as I understand it, the state levies a Wall Street transaction tax and then turns around and gives that money back at the end of every year. I read that somewhere. Unfortunately, I read a lot of things and remember very few of them. But it seemed to me that it was a pretty substantial amount of money. And if the governor's really scratching around for every penny, that seems to be a really good itch to scratch. Do you know anything about that?
Is this the stock transfer tax, Deborah?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the stock transfer tax, I just read an article recently that came from, I don't know if it was the Empire Center for Public Policy or if it was the Citizens Budget Commission, but I read an article somewhere that said the stock transfer tax is upwards of $7 or $8 billion worth of revenue that the state could realize, which $8 billion, that also happens to be,
It's a magic number.
it's a magic number. So I know that there's been a lot of discussion in the legislature, particularly within the assembly, of trying to pass a bill for the state to hold on to this stock transfer tax, the money from those stock transfers. The governor has said anecdotally, well, I don't know if he's made this public, but what we've heard from the second floor is, if you go through with this, you're going to force Wall Street to leave New York City, and they're going to go to Miami or Delaware or some other place that's more friendly for Wall Street business. So those are the two sides right now. I don't know where this is going to go next year. And the Association of Counties hasn't taken a position on it. Certainly,
No, I really wish that you would consider taking a position on it. If we did this temporarily as a stopgap measure, with the understanding that the state is underwater fiscally, and at the same time, while Main Street's sinking, Wall Street has been doing just fine. I just don't buy that Wall Street's going to move out of New York City.
Let me add, that's really interesting, an interesting idea. The state has done like 3-year increases on the marginal tax rate in the past. So for example, and Ryan, we have later in our agenda, which you have in your packet, we have a resolution about raising revenue. And this is one of the ideas. If it were a temporary raise, if it were given a 3-year and then a sunset, you know, whether anybody believes it'll sunset or not, formally in statute, it would be a sunset. You couldn't, Wall Street would be really, it would seem foolish to pick up and move temporary bill. A temporary.
Write it into the legislation, you know, the first year we'll withhold 100% of it. The second year, 75, the third year, 50. I mean, there are creative ways to write legislation. And I know Anna's listening to us.
I'm actually looking for articles. There's 2 that I want to send to all of you that talk about this one as well as the stock buyback. And there's pros and cons to both. What Ryan said is accurate, that one of the things that needs to be considered, I'm in support of it, but it has to be written in such a way that it does address the fact that trade is a significant amount of it is actually done online now. They don't have to be on the floor. So it needs to recognize that specifically. I've heard some people talk about having it be coordinated with other states. Deborah's point of having it be temporary and having it scale down so that people, it's the same thing as a pilot with a fixed rate. As long as you know what it is that you will be experiencing, then it's a different than having it be an unknown impact. So I'll get those articles, and Ryan, I'll send them to you too.
Great, thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
On the temporary bill, Martha, you just triggered my memory, and I wanted to bring this up, and you'll see this when I share this DOB recommendations report with everyone. We're actually asking for 2 components on the sales tax end of things, Deborah. And I'd be interested to hear where Tompkins County, what your thoughts are on this. But we've asked for a temporary 1% increase to the sales tax rate. So let's hypothetically say it's 8%, 4% county, 4% state. We've asked for a 3-year temporary increase to 9%, and then half of that penny, so 50% to be shared with the county and 50% to be kept with the state. So that would be a stopgap, short-term increase in the sales tax rate that would increase revenue for the state and for the county. And then on the other component, which doesn't impact Tompkins County, but it would impact other counties that they've asked for, is for the communities that are below 4%. So if they're at the statutory minimum of 3%, they've asked for the authority to locally pass a home rule resolution in local law to go up to the 4%. There's 4 counties right now that are below 4%. They want the authority to be able to go up to 4%. So that's something we've asked DOB to consider. I know that doesn't impact Tompkins County, but on the temporary component, we have suggested a temporary 3-year increase to sales tax.
Yeah, Ryan, I'll just jump in, and I see Mike Lane, and then we should move over to Diane. Frankly, and this is why we have this resolution that's in our packet.
That's regressive.
Sales tax is regressive. That's, people are going to pay for it for their diapers and, you know, whatever. And it's the people who are being hurt the most in this economy are going to pay. The people who are doing the best in this economy should listen. It's, you know, Cuomo has really been good about asking people to sacrifice, about people doing hard things for the good of everybody. Well, it's time that the wealthy be asked to do a little bit more or even a lot more for the good of the rest of us. And I just think the argument is ridiculous that, a fraction of a penny of a stock transfer Wall Street is going to pick up and move to Miami. That's
Sinking.
that's why that's why we put in this resolution a number of different items. It's like pick and choose, and there's legislation on every one. There's a great article in City and State. You probably saw it. Showing that there's legislation already introduced on every one of these things. And and we understand that the governor doesn't get behind anybody else's parade. He finds out where the parade's going. He jumps in front.
Yep.
So he's got to think this is his idea. And it's really wonderful that you guys have met with him now. You've handed him a list of ideas. This is really critical. We really appreciate it. But I think, we have had a stable economy and a solid financial footing for the county because we've chosen to do a little of this and a little of that over the years. We haven't relied on any one kind of way of keeping our budget in balance. This is the time. Next year's not an election year for the legislature or the governor. This is the time for everybody to bite the bullet. As Liz Kruger told me when we met her in February, the billionaires, they all live in my district. They call me and they're mad. And then they vote for me anyway, and they don't move. Or maybe they don't vote for me, but they never move. So this is really, really time. And the sales tax proposal, I think, is a non-starter. It doesn't help the people who need to be helped.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, on those other tax ideas, Martha, I'll take that resolution that you guys have. If it passes, let me know if it passes. And I'll bring that up to Stephen and say, look, this is what's come out of Tompkins County. For those actions, that would be the board of directors would have to approve that kind of action to be part of the policy for NISAC. Yeah. But I will 100% certainly bring it up to him to send to the board for their consideration. Absolutely.
I think the authority for those last 4 counties to go to 4%, that's fine. We think the state shouldn't have this iron hand grip on the sales tax level anyway, but so that would be fine. But going up to 9% doesn't do what we need done. Mike Lane?
Yeah, 2 things. One, I sort of agree with you, Martha, that 9% is a scary figure to go to. I don't think we've ever seen anything, even in New York City, higher than 8.5, if I don't believe.
That's right, Mike. That's at 8.5.
What could really help us more is to give us back that AIM funding that they stole from our sales tax, and the hospital aid, which has been stolen, and which makes us very, very worried that they will continue to find reasons to attack the county sales tax.
100%, Mike. That is on the top of the agenda this year, and we brought that to Robert's attention. We said on the AIM related payments, if you guys aren't willing to take it back, at least give us the flexibility to decide whether or not we want to do it. And on the distressed hospital fund, the hospitals have received over $200 billion from the federal government this year. So what Robert told us he would do is, I'm going to go back and do a reconciliation and look at what the hospital's loss of revenue was, how much money they received from the federal government, to really determine whether or not we need to be doing this. And we said, Robert, if you can do anything for us this year, eliminate that program. So I hear you, Mike. That's on the very top of the agenda.
And the other thing, I guess I agree a little. I disagree with Martha to the extent that I do think we can lose financial offices if we interpose this stock transfer tax. Maybe something the way Deborah is suggesting might work, but it'll be a slow bleed. It won't be just all of a sudden we're going to move the stock exchange to Miami, but it'll be offices moving to New Jersey or Delaware, and it will be the people who they employ moving. I mean, we already know COVID is chasing people out of New York City. The vacancy rate for apartments is up in New York City. So I don't think it's impossible to lose that kind of financial generator over a period of time.
Thanks. I would just also point out about the hospital fund. That was part of the deal that sort of got us out of the Medicaid, more of a Medicaid ripoff of us.
Absolutely.
So, that might bring that, but I don't know if that's we don't know where, you know anything about Medicaid at all?
Yeah, so we're very worried about Medicaid. Part R of the HMH bill, which everyone heard us pound into everyone's minds relentlessly this past year, was rejected, to Martha's point. That would have been a $2.5 billion cost shift to the counties outside of New York City, another $2.5 billion to New York City. In return for that, we settled on this concept of the distress hospital fund. This concept appeared, the governor, so the way the history is on this, it appeared out of the blue, so to speak. It was 11:30 at night on April 2nd, and this was slid into language. We got a call from a state lawmaker, thank gosh, that saw it, and they said, "Hey, is NYSAC aware of this?" And we said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, if we can reject Part R, would you live with this if that's the compromise deal?" And we said, "Yeah, absolutely," because $50 million, $2.5 billion, So that was how it all played out at the end of the day. On the Medicaid component, though, Martha, it's the largest program of state expenditure, right? And the MRT reforms. So let me lay a little bit of information for everyone to think about here just to have in the back of your mind. In the Families First coronavirus package, HR 6201, it was one of the first bills that Congress did back in March. They increased the EF map by 6.2%, which has resulted in a ton of new money to the counties in the state. By the way, we're still waiting on what happens to Q2 and Q3. You guys haven't received your money yet. We don't know if it's going to be a weekly share adjustment or a lump sum payment. We're trying to get an answer from the state on that. They did say they're going to release it. We just don't know how it's going to come out. So keep that in the back of your mind. But on HR 6201, when they increased the Medicaid percentage that the federal government kicked into the program, it hamstringed the governor's ability to institute some of his MRT2 proposals around eligibility. He was tweaking the lines on some eligibility criteria. That doesn't mean that those are dead in the water. As soon as the federal declaration is done, which right now it continues through the end of March. However, the president has the ability to retract that whenever he wants. But let's say that it continues through the end of March. On April 1st, the governor can institute all those changes because he's no longer getting that 6.2% EF map allocation from the federal government. So whether or not he comes back, Martha, with additional reforms, we've suggested a series. We received this from the DSS commissioners across the state. They supplied us with 25, 30 ideas of administrative actions that could be tweaked to make their lives easier and help make them more efficient in their job and their staff's job. So we've asked the governor to consider all those. Those would not require statutory changes at all. He could do them. He could direct the OMIG and DOH to go ahead and implement those right away. They were interested in a lot of those ideas, of course, but as far as Medicaid policy changes and financial position, I don't know what's, we're going to have to see when the executive budget comes out, what that's going to look like. But it could be another fight, just like last year. We could be fighting a multi-front fight this year. We could have a Medicaid issue. We could have state aid permanent cuts. By the way, if anyone knows of anyone in a state that has a U.S. senator who conferences with the Senate Republicans, please call them and tell them how important it is to get a stimulus package negotiated and passed. But like I said, I don't think that's going to happen right now. It's not with an undecided federal election.
Well, Ryan, thank you. That was the perfect segue to Diane. Listen, Ryan, this has really been so very helpful. Your advocacy and your sharing with us and you're listening to our point of view. We are deeply grateful. Thank you very, very much. And do you know Diane Miller, the Cornell University's government relations person in Washington?
Hi, hi, Diane.
Hi,
How are
Ryan.
you?
Good. I think we've been on these things before, but I have known Matt Chase for, God, 30 years practically. So way back when he was working for Jerry Solomon. So that's
wow.
We go back, and yeah, so his office is in my building, so I run into him quite a bit. So the counties are well represented in Washington.
Thanks, Diane. Thank you.
But I always do.
Ryan, you're welcome to stay as long as you like. We're grateful to have you. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't have anything to add to sort of Ryan's analysis of where the stimulus stands and what's going to happen. I mean, the Senate is, the House, as far as the House is concerned, they have their position. They've been negotiating, Nancy Pelosi has been negotiating with the administration on a smaller package than the HEROES Act, which was passed back in May. But state and local is a very important component of whatever it is that they're negotiating with the administration, one of the sticking points that they're pushing back on. But the Senate right now, I mean, I've been sitting here moving all my little parts around, trying to figure out, and it is possible that we will not know who is in control of the Senate until this special election runoff on January 5th in Georgia. And then, depending on how long it takes for them to decide the presidential election, because the vice president is the tiebreaker for 50. And so, nobody's conceding anything yet. And, Chuck Schumer doesn't ever give up until it's obvious that he has to. So I cannot possibly imagine, unless there is some crazy emergency or something, just that they can get their acts together in a lame duck session to actually pass anything meaningful. I would be surprised if they did anything in lame duck more than just a continuing resolution so that the government doesn't shut down in the middle of all of this. Now, I could be wrong. This could have been a wake-up call for everybody and they all come back and join hands and sing Kumbaya, but I don't think that's going to happen. And from Cornell's perspective, we're fingers crossed, it's 3 weeks until Thanksgiving and the students go home and everything so far has gone really well. I'm sorry that none of my colleagues from the community or Charlie or anybody who's closer to what's going on in the state and on campus is on, but I get the reports every day. And so, there's a big push from the administration for universities, for schools to be open. And so whether Cornell is a model for this, we haven't made it through flu season yet. So, it's still, what's going to happen. I think that there is some encouragement with the governor's, sort of backing off the quarantine policy as strongly as he was at the beginning of our fall semester. So again, I think though, but we're planned to pivot on a moment's notice as new information becomes available. This has been, so, we're watching very closely to see education assistance is also one of the pieces. Even the Senate, the Senate skinny bill had a measure of assistance for higher education, again, because this was the recognition that this was the administration's priority to have schools open and that there were these additional costs. I don't think that they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts because they love higher ed so much. And in fact, when the CARES Act was passed, there was really a lot of pressure for schools like Cornell not to take their assistance because the perception that we are rich and we can afford hundreds of millions of dollars of additional costs without batting an eyelash. Not true. And, we sort of our endowment did okay. I mean, I think, because the stock market's been sort of okay, so is the endowment, but this just, recent round of uncertainty puts all of that back in play too. So we're really just, the university is on pins and needles like everybody else is right now. I have not talked to anybody from Schumer's office today. I figured they probably stayed up later than I did. But how they're going to approach all of this, as far as the New York congressional races, there are so many of them that have not been called yet. Personally, I would rather be sitting where Claudia Tenney is sitting than where Anthony Brindisi is sitting right at this moment. But I do know that there are a lot of votes left to count. So, we're just, like I said, there's not a lot new to report, but we keep pushing really hard on our allies, and we emphasize every time that we have the chance to that the assistance to the state and local government is as critical for the university as any higher education or research or anything else that they put in there, because we want to live in a thriving community, and that's the only way to make it thrive. So that's all. That's all I can tell you right now. And I smile so I don't cry. So that's sort of how I feel about it.
Right. Thank you very much, Diane. And we really appreciate it. Does matter that's the state and local aid is part of your position, and we really appreciate that. That's a help. Any comments or questions from the committee? We really do appreciate this. I think, can't remember what conversation I was in, but I think it was on a NACO call. And there was, the summary was that if Trump won, and assuming the House, if Trump won, he would want to make a deal. So if the Senate didn't flip, it was up to McConnell, whichever president we had, it was really up to McConnell whether there was going to be another relief bill. That Trump would make a deal, he doesn't care. Or I am.
Yeah, he's very good at spending other people's money, so that's not a problem for him.
Right. So
philosophically, the way that it is for a lot of other Republicans.
Right. So it's a McConnell's the barrier on the bill.
Yeah.
Not the presidency.
And he's the barrier because his caucus is pushing back on him. And so, it was one thing to say, okay, we're all going to come together in March when we don't know what's going to happen. But now there's really a lot of, again, the pushback that it's a blank check to, all of these Democrat run places.
Blue states with high public pensions. Yeah.
Yeah, but that
insert whatever talking point you want. I mean, but that's and I think.
I mean, wasn't that before the July spike, the September spike, and the October and the November, December spikes?
And
those people don't care.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't seem to have reflected itself back in the policy positions. And so, that's, again, McConnell's the leader because he goes where his members want him to go. And so it's not just him deciding this is not going to happen. It's, it's based on a consensus in his caucus. And if they were pushing him, he would do it. I know Ryan mentioned his, affinity for cannabis. That's one of the few things where it's a McConnell position and not a caucus position. And, it's been interesting to watch that particular issue evolve. But, he doesn't do that very often, where it's like, this is Mitch McConnell speaking and not, the Republican caucus.
I agree 100% with your assessment, Diane. Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see on that. I think there still are some possibilities. We really don't know yet on a couple of Senate races, as well as we don't know yet on a couple of the states for the presidential. So I guess we will see. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Anna?
I actually just wanted to add, Diane, I know we like grilled Ryan through this whole thing, and it's not, your information too is deeply valuable. I think for myself, I'm just processing. I feel like I have a lot of questions percolating, but I'm so glad that you're here, and that you take the time to come be with us.
Yeah, no, look, this is, you guys are our partners. And so I suppose I should have told you congratulations too, but
thank you.
I
a lot of work to do.
I forget all my politeness.
Oh, that's all right. We'll be working together in whatever capacity, in my new capacity as well, with this group as well.
Yeah, so no, but like I said, it's so important, and you guys know Gary. I mean, and Gary drills this into our head too, is that, we are all in this, literally all in this together. And so it's, having worked for Maurice Hinchy for all those years, I used to get constituent mail from you, and so from this community, so I know how active and involved and how much the community pays attention to what's going on in Washington. And so that's just, like I said, I'm happy to be part of it all.
Thank you.
You mentioned the travel policy and having to do with Thanksgiving and all, and I must have missed something. I know Charlie was maybe going to be on the call, but he looks like he's not. Cornell, what do you mean by that? Is the dorms are going to close between Thanksgiving and February, right?
Yeah, so there are some students who, just as it happened after last March, who have petitioned to stay because they don't have any place to go, or because they're travel restrictions to their home countries or whatever. And so there will still be students on campus throughout that time. But yeah, that is the understanding. They're calling them semifinals, and then everybody will go home at Thanksgiving, finish the semester at home, finish finals at home. And so Charlie this was on a call with Charlie. He said that the governor is considering changing his quarantine policy again, it's if you are able to show that you have a negative test within within the small window before you come to the States, then you quarantine in New York for 3 days until you have another negative test. I can't remember the exact dates, but it's shorter than that. Come to New York and sit in a room for 14 days. And so it just gives a more flexibility. And again, it's more of the science-based. If you show you're negative before you test, and then you have a negative test again after you get there, then that 14, within that sort of incubation period, then 14 days in New York is overkill. That's my interpretation of it. And so and I know that, again, this is as experience has borne it out. And so this is, something where the governor has been talking to some of the public health experts, and there have been folks on campus who have been talking to him about this too, about how, and again, we've got a good track record to lean back on this semester. So, like fingers crossed for a good 3 weeks here until Thanksgiving. But that's, again, looking for as much flexibility, and that works. Flexibility that doesn't compromise safety, because that's still the number one concern.
So that means when the students come back, then they'll be able to come back.
Right, that there'll still be, I mean, there'll still be a process for making sure that they do not bring COVID out into the community. And so that's, but it's not this sort of prophylactic 14-day,
Right.
you know.
Okay. Henry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yes, that's the understanding that they changed for Thanksgiving, was that you're supposed to take a test 3 days before you leave, and then you take a test when you arrive. And then you stay in quarantine till you get till you get the test back, and then you're set. And so that's what they're doing for the spring semester.
Deborah?
Yes, thanks, Martha. Thanks, Diane. We appreciate your support. And I really tremendously impressed with how well Cornell has handled this. And we had a kind of a bumpy start, but it's really evened out, and the administration and the students are to be complimented, I think, on the care that they took. I'm curious as to whether these kids that are staying because they have no place else to go, is the university providing like house services and cleaning services and food service for these kids, or are they going to be in the local economy?
So it would be the same, the dining hall, the dining hall, the meal plans will still be open. Cornell Health will still be open. As far as, I don't know if they get maid service in their dorm rooms or cleaning in their dorm rooms. I don't know how that works, but I can certainly find out and let you know. They may have changed the rules this year because of COVID, but I'll get you an answer on that.
I appreciate it.
Anna?
Of course, I actually do have a question that inspired by Deborah's comment. I've actually heard from a couple constituents, and I had completely forgotten to ask you, after the students leave, Cornell has a very extensive testing program right now. And I'd love to know what the plan is for testing protocol and schedule once the students leave, and specifically whether or not after they leave, they are going to be providing on-campus testing for all staff, faculty, and students remaining on campus. So that's one question, whether they are going to continue to provide those testing at what schedule. And the second one is whether or not Cornell is open to, and maybe Jason has had this conversation, I'm not sure if he's still here with us, but about working with the community to support the community in testing and using the testing protocol to support the community. So those are two separate questions.
And I do not know the answer to those, but I know who does. And so I'll send a note to Joel Molina when we get off this call, and then have him get back to you, or get back and we can share it with the committee that way too. But I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that would be really great. I hope that was all clear what those, because there were a multi-part questions. So
absolutely. You want to know, will Cornell continue to test the staff and faculty who remain and have access to campus? And then will they make that capacity available to the community in some way?
Right. And what rate of scheduling? Is it going to be twice, and for the students as well, who are going to be
talk a little bit about that.
Great.
There is the intention to keep some of the testing going for existing staff and faculty. I think the issue of opening the capacity is twofold. One, it's the ability to administer it throughout the county. And that's a challenge in of itself right now. So there's running into capacity ability to administer more testing. And then it's also having the capacity to process what you're committed to now and continuing that once school opens back up. So for example, while the capacity may die down a little bit with some students maybe not being tested over the break, they are going to be back, and then that capacity is going to be ramped up again. So it's an issue of, if you open up the capacity for someone else, but then have to take it away come the time the students return. So I think there's a balance there. There's also an issue of resources and being able to administer more testing above the capacity they have now. That's not as much on a Cornell end as it is on a CMC end.
Yeah, I think that the first half of my questioning is probably the most important for Joel. And I trust Jason to continue those deliberations and conversations about community capacity.
Sure.
Thanks, Jason. Henry?
Yes, and Cornell's also having a town hall tonight at 7 o'clock, where Joe Molina will be hosting about COVID stuff. So
Yeah.
possibly ask him during that.
Yeah, I plan-
Where's the link for that, Henry?
I'll send it to you. It was just an email sent by Gary Stewart.
Thank you.
But you can also go to their community outreach page, and it should be on that page too.
Yeah, I plan to be on that town hall too. Not that anybody's going to have a question about DC, but
Oh, you never know. All right. Anything else for Diane? All right. Thank you again, Diane. It's really great to hear from you, and hang in there. We
I'm here in my shed in my backyard. So I don't go into DC, so I don't know what's going on there. I heard it was a little bit there was a little bit of street excitement last night, but not nearly as bad as they thought it could have been. So
yeah, okay. Henry and Anna, are your hands up again or still?
My hands should be down.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks again, Diane. All right, so a couple of quick things. My report, and this is a federal point. I heard, I was on, again, another NACO call. One of the changes in the, there will be some changes in committee structure with retirements in the House. Nita Lowy is chair of is the outgoing chair of the Appropriations Committee. And whoever it was saying that the several people who are kind of in line to take over appropriations in the House are in favor of really looking to do more capital funding. And Diane, if you have any thoughts on this, that localities like us should be really getting ready our proposals to jump on any of those programs that might come forward. Do you know anything about that?
well, there has been since Mrs. Lowy announced her retirement, there's been this sort of behind the scenes jockeying for who would be next. And so the caucus elects, or the steering committee selects who the chairs will be, so that but the people who've thrown their hats in the ring are Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut, Marcy Kaptur from Toledo, Ohio, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida. I think it's going to be between Rosa and Marcy, and I couldn't tell you which one. Rosa's kind of I would put my money on Rosa, but there's no sure thing there. I think that infrastructure is going to be, that's the whole key to the recovery, whatever the recovery is. Republicans, Democrats, they have sort of different amounts of money that they want to spend on it, but I think that there's fairly universal agreement that there's going to be something around infrastructure. So thinking ahead is probably a good idea. I know we've got our wish list at Cornell if they get into research facilities and things like that. If they give NSF some money to spend, say, on infrastructure. So.
Okay, so do you think then either Rosa or Marcy would be sort of more supportive of that than Anita was?
Well, I think, again, it's so Nita was at the point where she was doing relief, not recovery. And so I think if we had gotten to recovery, she would have put as much money into this as, they would let her. But the immediate, her job was to take care of whatever the immediate needs were, rather than, and then save the rest of it for down the road. And, but, they're right now, the House has gone through the motions of a big infrastructure package through the transportation bill that has everything, as Mike's on here, airport spending and roads and facilities and sort of green infrastructure as well. And so, a lot of that stuff doesn't come through the appropriations committee because it's got its separate stream of funding. And so it has to be authorized through different committees. So I think that that's, it's not just the appropriations chair who would put money in, but if there's another, we'll use ERA as an example. Remember the stimulus from 2009. So if there's another package like that, then, big pieces of that do go through the appropriations committee. But about 1/3 of ERA was tax stuff. So, it's whoever's in charge of Ways and Means. Well, it's Richie Neal in the House, and there's going to be a new finance committee chairman because what's his name? Grassley is term limited if it's a Republican, Ron Wyden. And so, you may see a lot of tax exempt bonding authority and things like that as the way to spur infrastructure as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. So the idea of just sort of getting our proposals organized. Thank you. Appreciate that. A couple other things on our agenda here. I wanted to make sure people knew about the phone call on next Tuesday, November 10th at 1 o'clock with Abram Lustgarten. That's the author of that article. It's a link in your packet. The great climate migration. Climate change will force a new American migration. It was he's a ProPublica reporter, and this was published by ProPublica and the New York Times. It's a long article, but it's really important. There are a lot of implications for local government, and it's something that we should be thinking ahead and aware of. And so he'll be on a phone call with us, along with it's a NACO call, but everybody here is invited.
I have to say, he was one of my childhood best buddies. I'm like so proud of that guy. He's from here, y'all. So
right.
It's something for all of us to be proud of.
Yeah.
From Trumansburg, actually. Well, childhood Trumansburg.
Yeah. So his dad lives down the road from me. So, so that's available for everybody. And then when I asked Tiger for your ideas about what we should do with the time that we have left on the committee, Deborah pointed out the idea of looking at the structure of state committees and what would be important. So I got that into your packet, and I have to say I pulled this off the web and had to copy and paste. And as you can see, there's a vast number of committees. It's mind-numbing. I mean, Anna, it's there's every member of the legislature has a couple or three committees that they chair, it seems like. So it will be interesting to familiarize ourselves with these bodies, with these groups. We have had interactions with a number of them. One in the assembly we haven't had much to do with is environmental conservation. That used to be when in the Senate, that used to be Tom O'Mara. So we had it in there, but Todd Kaminsky is the chair in the Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee. That one might be one we want to kind of connect with. So I'm just going to toss out, is there anybody want to talk here about, any particular committees or one that you want, any that you want to know more about, or which ones are more or less important? You've got this in your packet and wonder what your thoughts are.
I think that the big ones for us that we've been focusing on, I'm sorry, I didn't even raise my hand.
All right. Or go ahead, Anna, then Mike.
I apologize. My brain is moving so fast to try and prepare. I have 7 weeks. The housing committee, I think I would love to hear. I understand the chair, that is an open chairship. I'm very curious where that's going to go. Also corrections. There have been so many changes in the last 24 months with respect to bail reform and criminal justice reform. So that's another one. Environmental conservation.
Wait, are you saying that the chairship of
housing is up for grabs?
Okay.
So I'll be curious to see where that's going. There is at the end of this year, Cuomo put together a task force almost 2 years ago, to evaluate early education and childcare. And that report is due at the end of this year with a list of recommendations. And it is desperately needed. They did interim recommendations at the end of last year that were not heeded at all. And I think that it would be to our benefit, particularly given what we're hearing from the YMCA and other childcare facilities, to understand that report as much as possible and take a stand on it and work with NISAC on it, because there's no way we can do real economic recovery if half our population of adults can't go back to work. So I'd love to bring them in and understand children and families. And Martha, the other committee that tends to go under the radar that I don't think we often think about, but is one that I have my sights on is one that's called commissions. I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but I will find it. Oh, it's called corporations, authorities, and commissions. So we always focus on environmental conservation, but actually the PSC, NYSERDA, all of those report to corporations, authorities, and commissions. So it has an environmental focus that we tend to overlook. So just bringing up a few things that I think would be great for this committee to be educated on.
All right, and I'll just say it was Deborah's suggestion that we ask Anna her priorities and for moving to Albany, and Anna said she'll be happy to talk about it next month.
Yep, happy to.
Okay, that's great. Mike.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was. Glad to hear Anna's comments. Anna, I hope you look at the Economic Development Committee, because that would be kind of important for us. We haven't had any representation there.
Yep, it's on my list. Absolutely, Mike. And I will share, I'm going to set up, I'll only be able to be on 5 or 6 committees only. There's like 10 that really could use our focus. Can't do that. The Health Committee is one of the hardest committees to get on. And we haven't brought it up today, but there is so much literature that shows the New York Health Act would actually save us money. I do not know why we're not looking at that, given that we are at such a deficit. But the Health Committee is, as I said, is one of the hardest committees to get on. Because of my background in public health, I am going to push for it. It's virtually impossible, but not 100%, maybe 99%. Yeah, there's the ones that I'm looking at for what it's worth: the health, children and families, corrections, economic development, higher education, housing, agriculture, environmental conservation, transportation, corporations, authorities, and commissions.
So that's way more than 5, Anna.
It is. So what I was told that I need to do is give a priority list of 10, and then leadership will pick from that which ones I get. And I'm putting them in the order of priority. And the only reason I haven't sent it in yet is because I have to evaluate what the likelihood of getting on different committees are, and that will affect where I put them on my priority list. So, I'm still doing that research, but I have to send in, it was suggested to send in a list of 10. So I'll share those with y'all next month.
And that sounds great. And this task force report, I think Sue Dale Hall has shared the interim report. Is she on that task force for child?
No, actually Kelly Tobin is, and she is the director of the YW in Cortland. She's brilliant. She is the City of Cortland mayor's wife, kind of a power couple. I think she would be happy to come in. I can ask her.
All right. Well, let's consider that for next time. All right. Any other thoughts about the Senate and Assembly committee structure? And I think as we, it's hard to think about. We usually do lobbying in January and February. I guess lobbying will be by Zoom. I don't know, but we should try to figure out how that happens and kind of get ourselves organized for that. Deborah.
Yeah, I was was wondering, I would imagine that some of these committee chairmanships will be changing. I was wondering if it might be useful if people on this committee picked one or two of these state committees that they were particularly interested in and form or begin to form relationships, contact staff and leadership for these committees and try to form relationships so that we would be able to lobby informally and, and consistently over time for initiatives that we think are worthwhile.
Deborah, that's brilliant. That's a great idea. Let me just say one more thing and then I'll go to Mike and then Anna. It might be worth us focusing on the Senate. At least it isn't quite as long a list of, and obviously we'll have a pretty good connection to the Assembly. So, Mike Sigler.
I guess looking up the list, my big question is kind of like the Energy Committee in both the Senate and the Assembly. I'm kind of curious as to what their new focus is going to be. I mean, it certainly seems like the governor. I mean, you don't have home rule anymore.
Mike, can you turn off your video? You're breaking up.
The citing of these. Sure. Give me 1 sec. No, I'm wondering what the energy committees are going to be. It certainly seems to me like the governor has taken over most of the control over, for example, the siting of a lot of these projects. Certainly home rule isn't going to apply, it seems. I don't know, saying maybe there should be back on some of the siting so that the legislature actually has a role in some of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. My experience, on these kind of issues, it's more the Environmental Conservation Committee. I'm not sure exactly what the energy committees do, but maybe Anna has the answer to that. But you're right. We should certainly familiarize ourselves more with those two committees.
I can just add, I was having a conversation with Charlie Krasansky about this. He's been, very helpful because of his experience. And the Energy Committee has been, in general, a very sleepy committee. And as Martha said, a lot has gone through NCON, but others have gone through, for example, because the PSC reports to corporations, authorities, and commissions. That was a reason why I was interested in that committee. So, Mike, I think it's a few different, you can come at it from a few different angles, but not much has been happening for the last couple of years with the Energy Committee, which is why it wasn't on my top 10 for that reason. And the other thing well, obviously that, and I have my hand up.
Okay, Mike Sigler, are you finished? There's a lot of noise.
I am finished. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now that's a really good point. Anna, do you have something last thing to say?
Well, I was just going to respond to what Deborah said and just add a little bit of information, which is the way that the state bill process works is very, very different than the way our process works, which is something, is brought to committee and then it is technically that, but a legislator can bring forward a bill regardless of what committee it would ultimately end up in. So I don't have to be on a committee to bring forward a bill. It would then go through a process that would be determined which committee or committees it would go through. So if there's legislation that this county wants me to bring forward, and if there are senators that I know would be interested, I can work with them on it. Okay. So I think that's just important to know the different process.
Okay. All right. Let's wrap this part up. We're getting a little bit behind here. I really like the idea of people picking a committee that they're interested in, and I was gonna put in the committee chairs, and that it's just vast on the website. It's easy for you to go to it yourself and poke around at what you're interested in. Just Google New York State Assembly or New York State Senate. You can get there. But Mike's point about the siting commission reminds me, I was part of a work group that met on Monday. NISAC is preparing testimony on ORIS, on the Office of Renewable Energy siting, new law to accelerate. So NISAC is preparing testimony. I was part of that work group, and they've got a draft, and it was a really good discussion. They're going to try to get that draft, tidied up and send it back. I can send it to everybody here if you're interested, for testimony that NISAC will be making later this month. So
That'd be
Anna,
great, Martha. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay. All right, so let's go to Mike Sigler. Do you have a vice chair's report?
I really don't, just because of everything that happened yesterday. So I guess we're just going to go forward. I mean, the Senate's, obviously I was in contact with all of our state senators yesterday. Don't know how that's going to work out, actually. It'll be interesting. I think Tom O'Mara and those guys, at least Pam won. That's a surety, so I'm happy about that.
Mhm.
But as for the other two, I have no idea yet. But if things hold up, it looks like Peter Oberacker could be a new senator to replace Seward. The good thing for us, I think, in that case, is he comes out of county government. So if we talk to him about things like Medicaid and unfunded mandates, he's going to at least know what we're talking about and feels the pain. So that's a high side. Beyond that, like you guys, I'm waiting to see what happens with all this. So.
Yep.
Mike, you'll be pleased to hear that I voted for Pam based on how responsive she's been to Lansing's concerns and her positions on clean water and the environment.
Yeah, she definitely shows up. That's the one thing I really like about Pam. So.
All right, that's a good report. We'll keep an eye on it. I think, there are a lot of absentee ballots out in New York State, and they don't even start counting them till next Monday. All right, we have a resolution, guys. We actually have a piece of, action, something to vote on. What, Mike? I can't understand you, Mike. Mike? All right. Maybe, well, looks like you're driving, Mike, so I don't know if you can put anything in the chat. All right, I am looking for, and the resolution was sent to you.
Nothing.
What, Mike? Okay. The resolution was sent to you after the original agenda went out. So if everybody can pull it up, where'd it go? Do I have a motion to get this on the floor? Moved by Anna, second by Deborah. Thank you, Anna, for helping to write it. Appreciate it. So the title is, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention also that Katrina sent around the 2-page legislative program that NISAC has put together. So that's in your inboxes too. Title of this is urging New York State to ask the wealthiest New Yorkers to pay more to support their fellow citizens during this crisis. Discussion. Anna?
I did want to note something that Martha and I talked about. We did not specify, the different billionaires taxes bills that are out there and ultra-millionaire and millionaires taxes. Just note that there are about 6 of them. And some of them, I think there's one at least that goes to the general fund. One goes to education. The funding would go to education. Another one would go to address the fact that that some marginalized populations, including immigrant populations, have been excluded from the workforce in certain ways, and it would create equity. So they all have a different focus. So I do want to point that out. And note too, and this was something that's really important, the whereas statement, the second to last whereas statement. One of the big arguments is that that the billionaires would just leave the state if we did a tax. And there are at least 4 historic cases of significant increases in taxing of the rich. And none of them have led to an exodus at all. And the most recent, obviously being in 2017, the SALT, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And in fact, there was an increase in billionaires after that, 2017. And the obviously 1.1% increase in 2009 after the 2009 economic collapse. Those are huge data points. And the other last thing that is super important to note is the 8.6% increase in collective wealth of billionaires just since February. This is above and beyond what they started with. There was an article that I read of Bloomberg that he could spend all of the money he's made, and by next week he would have made it back because of the profits that he's making, that they're all making. So I just want to put that in perspective. And lastly, that people often misunderstand this to think that this is going to affect people who make 100,000 a year and above, or 200,000 or above. We really need to communicate that this is very specific to the highest earners that are under a couple hundred people in the state. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Anna. I got Mike Sigler, then Mike Lane. Mike Lane first, and then Mike Sigler.
Thank you. Read the resolution, and I will support it, except I think when I read the title, it made me think we were asking them to give money to charity. It didn't really reflect what the resolve says. And I just kind of wonder if other people might not understand it for the same reason, but I will support the resolution.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm looking at it. Can anybody think of some suggestions to? You're right.
It sounds like the resolve.
Did you have any amendment, Michael? Mike?
No, in fact, because I don't have it on the screen in front of me. I read it before the meeting.
Let's see. Urging New York State. All right. If somebody could work on that while
I will.
Chew gum at the same time. Mike.
We could change it on the floor.
Yeah, I can work on it.
From the legislature.
Yeah, let's see if we can do it here. Mike Sigler.
Listen, I don't, it's not like I'm big friends with any billionaires. I don't have any billionaires in Lansing to my knowledge. I can't escape the fact that we spend a lot of time on this, and it's simply not going to address the problem. And I guess that's where I come down on it. We could confiscate $1 billion from, not even $1 billion. Let's say we just confiscate, $100 million from every billionaire. I don't even know if that covers our deficit. We have a structural problem. And to say that, well, this isn't going to affect people that make under $500,000. I don't see that happening. I just, because we can't get there from what we're suggesting here. It's kind of like, it's like when somebody says, well, their wealth went up 25%. And, Bezos' wealth, yeah, it went up 25% because Amazon stock went up 25%. So unless you are literally saying that we're going to force him to sell part of his company and then collect a tax on it, then that money isn't real. It's on paper. So we're talking about this like this is going to be some kind of big budget item where we're going to collect a lot of cash and be able to, and we're already doling up the money up to where we're going to spend it. And we just went through an hour and a half talking about how the state doesn't have any money and they're going to make 20% cuts across the board. So it's like, I feel like we're just kind of going down a rabbit hole on an issue where we really have to look at the structural spending of the state. And to act like these billionaires, well, we're going to just tax them more and that'll bail us out. Like I said, do what you want. I don't know if billionaires are going to leave the state, but to act as if billionaires haven't left the state. We used to have 120 something billionaires. Now we're down to, I think, 76 according to Forbes. No, they have. I mean, it's not as if we haven't lost any. They certainly have. We just haven't lost them all. Will this be a max exodus? I don't think so. But hey, I don't know. They're going to go where the money is. And if the money is not in New York State, then they're going to go to the state where that money is. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Listen, I'm pretty sure it's going to pass, but whatever.
All right, well, Anna, let me take this. We're almost at the end of the meeting. Mike, I understand. And in fact, that was kind of why I thought we shouldn't propose any specific one of these. They each have different kind of ramifications, different consequences. So but I think just like Tompkins County has done well by doing a little of this and a little of that, and a little of this and a little of that over the years, I think it's time to increase marginal tax rates or increase the transactions that are only paid by people at the very top of the spectrum, or some combination of those, while we also probably are going to inevitably look at cuts, inevitably look at other kind of damage to people. And I think it is time to look at this. We've had other crises, and sometimes we've raised taxes on New York State has raised taxes on the wealthiest on their marginal income, not even on their whole income, but the marginal. And sometimes they haven't. I think this is time to ask everybody to pitch in. I really do. Anna?
Just super quick, Mike, I hear you, but it's actually not true that it wouldn't raise enough money to cover our deficit as a state. Just to give you some numbers, this is from the Fiscal Policy Institute. You can look this up. Estimated 5.5 billion from the billionaires tax. I can tell you it is specifically S 8277 or A 10414. 2.5 to 4.5 billion for the existing ultramillionaires tax, 650 million that would be from the pied-à-terre tax, 13 billion from the stock transfer tax. Those are just a few. So even if we did a temporary one. So, there is this message that even if we implemented all of these, it wouldn't touch our existing deficit. We have a $13 billion deficit. Even with the stock transfer tax alone, it is estimated to create a $13 billion that could go towards the deficit for the state. So keep that in mind when we're thinking about all of these. The idea is, just like Martha said, that it would be exploring the entire suite and piecemealing a fix of our deficit. And it is specifically having them pay their fair share.
And we need to balance the approaches. I mean, it's just not okay that Governor Cuomo has just refused. So if we can put a little pressure on and maybe be part of pushing him in front of this parade, that's the goal. Mike Sigler, do you still have your hand up, or again, you want to respond?
No, I'm all set. We're good.
Okay. All right. Anna, did you come up with a title change at all?
All right, multitasking. Yeah, I mean, I think that the important thing, where it says to pay more, I would just say to pay their fair share towards the state budget. Just very simple.
That, I think, doesn't address the potential for misunderstanding what we're asking here.
But if you say specifically towards the state budget, then
I would just say urging New York State to increase taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers.
Yeah.
Mike's point was that, to ask them to pay more, are you asking them to pay more voluntarily? Are you asking them to, pay higher taxes? I don't think using the word confiscate is the best way to describe taxation. But perhaps urging New York State to tax its wealthiest citizens commensurate with their ability
Yeah,
to.
How about this?
commensurate with their ability, I like.
How about this? Urging New York State to increase taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers in order to better support their fellow citizens, something like that?
That's fine too.
I don't like fellow citizens because again, it goes to what Mike was saying, where it sounds like the money would be just redistributed from wealthy to the to everyone else. And so, specifically saying to the budget or commensurate to their ability to pay. And since it's focused on taxes, it still covers, transfer tax or any Wall Street taxes, because really, honestly, if you think about it, they're the ones that it would affect the most.
All right, urging New York State to increase taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers. Is there another part of this, or then just end during this crisis?
I would say so that taxes reflect people's ability to pay.
Well,
our state taxes affect people.
Let's work on this and do it at the meeting, because
all right,
I think everybody's been here for 2 hours and it's been a really interesting 2 hours. Don't get me wrong, but I think everyone's tired.
Yeah, I was hoping we might come up with something quickly, but it looks like not so much. So, all right. So given that we will have a revised title at some point. Are we all set with the discussion? Anything else? Okay, let's vote on the resolution to be further amended. Go across my screen. Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Anna Kellis.
Yes.
Mike Lane.
Yeah.
Henry Granison.
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
No.
And I'm a yes, so that passes. All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate this. We have minutes for October 7th. Can I get a motion on that? By Anna, seconded by Deborah. Any discussion? Just huge props to Katrina for getting all of this stuff down. It's really like a library we have. All right, I'll go in the other order. Mike Sigler. On the minutes?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Okay, I got Henry, then I got Mike. Anna?
Yep.
Deborah?
Yes.
All right, and I'm a yes. Thank you very much, and thanks again, Katrina. All right, folks, this has really been interesting. I'm going to go back to CNN and find out what's going on. All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hang in there, everybody.
All right, thank you, Diane. All right, have a good day. Bye-bye.